um, after I saw this video with Julian and Abby arguing, and it was talking about slavery. Now, Julian brought up slavery, and Abby responded. Now, here is my thing. It is very narcissistic to say, well, because you once slaved your own people, I get to get excused for slaving multiple groups of people for a ridiculously long time. And having taken well over 800,000 people when the Civil War died in the North. The North barely took some of the forts in that war. But it's excused because you once slaved your own people. People don't realize that that tactic is narcissistic. It's like saying, I can go buck wild with my abuse, but it don't matter because you once abused somebody before. That's narcissistic, y'all. Okay, that is passive covert narcissistic. Black people need to stop trying to talk about slavery with other groups. Stop talking about it with them, because people are sensitive about their own culture and race, and they will always try to find a loophole to excuse what their own race do, to minimize it or justify it, or make it equal to you and them and all type of stuff. Black people need to stop talking about slavery with white people, because when the race is in more power and control, they will feel very comfortable with minimizing what they're doing. They feel more protected with doing that. Okay? Now, in response to Julian and Abby's video, when Julian gave that super small percentage saying white people only enslaved this small percentage of blacks, that is BS. She is talking about the statistic that the white slave masters gave. Okay? That statistic was probably done by a white government during Martin Luther King time. Okay, that was probably done during then. Why would we trust that statistic? Why are black people trusting any of the statistics? Why are we trusting the numbers that speak against us, that we can't even find a black vice president or a black congressman or some black scientist or research person come up with that statistic in collaboration with a white official? No one is going to give the true number of their crimes when they are in the power position. They will trickle the truth. They will trickle the truth because they think they can get away with it. And this is within any situation. People will trickle the truth when they're holding all the power, holding all the power play. So black people, stop rushing to listen to these statistic numbers, especially from descendants of a race that slaved your people. Why would you even cater and believe the statistics? If you look in the comments of Julian and Abby's video, you see a whole bunch of white people immediately believing in the statistics. Immediately believing in it. Even though they know that the statistics was given during a time when slavery was still glamorized. Still glamorized. Okay? Now, the number for how many blacks were slaved is not even accurate, what Julian say. And we know this because of the 800,000 soldiers that died in the Civil War whose bodies was recovered. Now we know many of them were black or Irish, but many of them were black because the black men were signing up during the Civil War like crazy when they found out they could get a check. But there were thousands of bodies that was not recovered, that was buried in the sand after the war ended, and those bodies are still in the dirt on the south part, in the south, and they built buildings on top of their bodies. Most of the black men that went into the Civil War went in there to escape slavery, to get money to try to free some of their family members, or to get enough money so that when they go back home, if they live through the Civil War, they can pay to afford to get their families to escape and survive going through the Underground Railroad, and have enough money to eat during their escape flee to the north, to hide and be free. So the number is not correct. Julian is not correct because they are not counting. She is not counting the black soldiers who were still technically not free slaves. They just signed up to fight in the Civil War. She's not counting. They did not count the ones that was never, bodies never found. And it has been estimated that thousands, on purpose, the Southern soldiers purposely did not want to look so ruthless if the real count came out of how many blacks they actually killed. Several of the forts was not taken. Bodies were blown up right at the face of cannons, and their bodies in the north was not allowed to go all the way up to the cannons on the south side and recover those bodies. They might get sabotaged or jumped by the white soldiers. So those bodies was left to rot and left in the sand. Okay? They are also not counting in that statistic number the blacks that were slaves and then bought their freedom, or had a slave master pay for their freedom. But that doesn't mean they were never slaves. They still should have been counted as having been a slave. But that wasn't counted. The statistics is counting only those that were currently slaves. Currently slaves. First of all, not all slaves were accounted for. Not all slaves were documented. So Julian needs to shut up. There was the legal theft of slaves, of blacks. They wasn't even taken from the auctions. They was taken just walking down the street and just kidnapped and made a slave. She's not counting that. So if I was on our show, I would have put all that in Abby's face. Julian's face. I would have let Julian run her mouth, and then I would have put her in her place with that number. Okay? This is why it's important to do deep research as a black person. Stop just letting that statistic number just be slapped up in your face and taking it at face value. You have to ask questions about history before you will let this toxic government give you a statistic number and say believe it. There was countless blacks that were free. They had free papers, and they was kidnapped, enslaved, and not documented because the slave masters knew they would get in trouble if they had illegally made somebody a slave that was actually free. First of all, there was slave masters in the North who was shipping blacks to the South to be slaves. Free blacks was being forced onto some boats from the North and forced on trains. They were free, but forced to go to the South enslaved. Not every white person in the North was against slavery. Some of them was all about the money. They might not have been slaving in their own home, but they didn't have a problem with selling free blacks to be slaves. So Julia needs to shut up. And there's a difference between slaving your own people and slaving, and nobody knows if the Native Americans were at least properly feeding their slaves. Nobody knows that. Nobody, the generation that the Civil War time wasn't around during that time. But we know for a fact that the blacks who were slaves of the white slave masters was fed pig feet, pork scraps, uh, dirty stuff, made to forced living shacks, the horrific version of slavery. We do not know if the Native Americans was torturing their own slaves for no reason. We don't know that. First of all, if we're going to get into the slavery in Egypt, the house slaves in Egypt was treated way better than the house slaves in the South. The house slaves in Africa, in Egypt, they were allowed to wear fine clothes and beautiful linen. They was allowed to hang out at the pool and be in the pool and stuff. They was actually branded so they was protected from any cruelty. There was a sub version of royalty. And they got to eat in the house. There was no you the slave in the house, but then you got to go outside and eat. It wasn't that type of situation. Also, they was not eating down in some rundown basement in the damn Egyptian place. They was allowed to also sit around on the main floor and eat high-end food and everything. So comparing American slavery, even of our own kind, comparing that to the African Egyptian indoor house slaves is no comparison. It was the American indoor house slave was extremely toxic, okay, and they were being raped. In Africa, Egyptian, the royalty, they didn't believe in putting their blood in the help. They didn't believe in that. They were sleeping with their own blood. Okay, so they kept their blood in the family. They weren't raping their servants. So if we're going to get into comparing, okay, if there's any Julians in this video, the difference is the most respectable way of having a slave compared to having something to abuse. That is the difference. That is the difference with Africa and Egypt. The Africans who were slaving Africans did allow the servants that buried their own. They had their own graveyard. They had their own graveyard. Okay? Some of the kings actually gave up some of the Egyptian land for the servants to bury their own. America did not provide free burial ground to their house slaves. That was not given as a reward for the field house slaves or the black indoor house slaves. Doesn't matter if they was black or white or Irish, whatever. Okay? Because if that was the case, my grandfather George, I should be able to find his grandparents' tombstone out in his graveyard, out in one of these graves in my genealogy. But the reason why I can't is because the slave masters them days did not provide a burial service for their slaves. They simply shifted their bodies off to the furnace and the ashes and had their ashes just thrown somewhere. It would, and then sometimes it took their body out in the woods and just buried it and didn't even bother to put a marker on it. So the point is, we can go by that damn number all we want, but when we ask questions and when we research comparison of African slavery versus white slavery, there's a huge difference. Class is in session. This is why it's important to listen to old heads, people over 40. We've had more time to research this trifling history. We've had more time. We were around in a generation where we didn't have to be. The Generation X, we know quite a lot because we had time to ask our grandparents questions who were still alive during racism. My grandmother was around during racism. My grandmother was a house turtle dove slave. Basically, she was a slave. Okay, my mother's grandmother was born in the early 1900s. That is before Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And my grandmother was a house cook. And she, when it came time, during Emancipation Proclamation, my grandmother was released poor and broke, without any money for a funeral. If she died, she had nothing. She ended up marrying a man who decided to sign up in the military to be able to provide for their family. My grandfather fought in the Holocaust War and was captured and was a prisoner of war. Okay? Prisoner of war. And when he came back, the government didn't care at all. They didn't care about his giving him medical benefits. They didn't care about removing all the scrap metal out of him. And he slowly wasted away, dying at home. My grandmother unable to work because she had to take care of kids and him. So she had to live off welfare and babysitting. She became a nanny in the 50s. She was grandmother was a 17-year-old house cook in the 1940s. And she had her first baby at about 18 years old. Because back then, the house working blacks could not afford gynecology. Okay, you had to have money to afford that. My grandmother sat around with cancer in her body under the age of 20 years old. She had early onset cancer in her uterus that she did not even know she had while she was delivering babies. Real talk. Okay? Now, my mother remembered being a little girl and going to white people's homes with my grandmother to be a house cook. My grandmother did not like white people at all because how they did her during the early 1940s, how they starved her, how they barely paid her and basically slaved her out as a cook. So she was very, very picky about who she dealt with who was white. And she mainly only dealt with Irish people. That's why she liked my husband, because she knew very well the white people who fought in the Civil War. Why? Because she was born in the 1930s. So she knew the Civil War history. See, I was a person that spoke to my mom and asked my mom questions. I was close to my mom. And my mom would tell me things about my grandmother. And I can tell you right now, the slavery of the house slaves wasn't doing that much better. So to sit up for Julian to make it seem like it wasn't that bad, it was the same as the African Egyptian slavery. No, it wasn't. The African Egyptian, and the Native Americans, they had an image and reputation to protect. The last thing they wanted was the slaves to rise up against them and tear down their whole damn kingdom. So they made sure that the slaves was compensated in some way. Slavery in America was about the lack of compensation. People not being paid for their damn service. Blacks that's sitting up there just eating garbage and not giving no medical money for medical, not giving any money. Now, I'm not saying Abraham Lincoln was a saint. I'm not saying Abraham Lincoln was a saint. But that's what Abraham Lincoln was trying to do. He wasn't necessarily trying to stop people from owning people. He was trying to stop them from thinking they can do it for free. And they could do it and only give people garbage to eat. Abraham Lincoln had slaves, but he took good care of his slaves. I'm not saying it's right to tell somebody they can't leave and that they chained to the house property. I'm not saying that's right. But if you're going to do it, have some respect. My problem is that white people was doing that to group after group after group after group. The Greeks were siding with the Romans. The Romans were siding also with Italians. All of them different groups jumping the Asian people, jumping the Jewish people, and jumping the blacks. I could say the names they was calling all three of those groups, but YouTube will ban my channel. Okay? The biggest groups, the biggest leading powerhouse groups teamed up and jumped the smaller groups. They even jumped the Vikings. The Vikings fought almost to the death, almost genocide, fighting Britain. Fighting for their right to have their own religion. Fighting for their right to have female high priestesses. Fighting for the right to have non-traditional lifestyle, their own damn lifestyle. Fighting for their rights to own their own waters that was theirs. Now, there is a difference between monopolizing the slavery, and that is exactly what the white groups did, period. And they used their monopolizing energy to intimidate some of the African tribes to join in. Basically, you either join in or you die. You join in with slaving more of the Africans or you die. So not all Africans was happily slaving other Africans. Some of them were dark Persians and they was fearing for their life. When we get into the movie about 300 Spartans, okay, where there was dark Persians involved, they knew they was outnumbered. So they surrendered and joined the slave master. That don't mean they wanted the slave. So I don't know why Julian's not talking about the fact that some African kings surrendered. They saw that if they kept on fighting, it would be genocide of their people. They wanted to save as many people as they already had left. How the hell could one group of people win against a group of people who have monopolized with other groups of people, where they were literally dominated the earth map with getting other enormous large groups to join with them? So how in the hell did the Native Americans have a fighting chance? They did not. How in the hell did certain parts of Africa and Egypt have a fighting chance? They did not. They did not. And one white leader after another kept monopolizing. Napoleon, every single one. Christopher Columbus, every single one. Just kept on monopolizing. So basically what Julian is excusing is it doesn't matter how long they did it and how much they strengthened their slavery power. Because you slaved your own, and it doesn't it doesn't matter why. We the same. No, we ain't the same. We is not the same. We is not the same. Native Americans, slaving Native Americans is not the same as a multi-race group going from every part of the world trying to slave. No, that's messy. That's very narcissistic, psychopathic, and it's abuse of power to the 10th degree. So it is not the same. And so black people, stop listening to these statistics and stop being so quick to just use these statistics at face value. They're hiding the fact that there was so many undocumented black slaves and murders of black people on purpose so that it would never be called a Holocaust. So we would never get reparations. We would never be able to get redemption and restitution. That's why. That's why the KKK never released their little secret little sheets of how many lynchings they did every week. When the Grand Dragon gave up his position, I'm sure he kept that sheet under lock and key to the next Grand Dragon, to the next Grand Dragon, to the next Grand Dragon. And if anybody in the KKK told, they would be treated like the blacks they lynched. So the undocumented matters. It matters. I'll call it what it is. A lot of people jumped out of here because they thought that I was going to come attacking black people. People love to watch videos with video titles where they think, oh, somebody's putting black people in their place. Even some black people love to watch that because they are still passive, glorified house Negroes. And the white people who don't want to see this video, it's because it makes you uncomfortable. It makes you uncomfortable how trifling your race actually got with their abuse of their power. How trifling they got because they had cannons and the natives had bow and arrows. How trifling they got because they had 3, 4, 5 groups. The English and the British and the Romans and the Greeks and the Russians and all them all siding and all got weaponry that will kill somebody in an instant compared to the Africans with their bow and arrows and their sticks and the natives with their bow and arrows and sticks. That was a complete abuse of power because I bet you any money if they fought the same way that the Africans and the Native Americans fought, there would be more losses on their side. There would have been more white people dying, more because they wasn't as skilled in the weaponry of the Africans and Native Americans. To go into a fight trying to conquer a village and you got lethal weaponry that won't miss because you got scopes and stuff all on it and stuff like that, and you can shoot somebody from way across the football field. It's an abuse of power in war. It was never a fair fight. It was never a fair fight when the Europeans went after the natives and the Africans. Nothing about that was fair. It was an abuse of power, even based on, like I said, just based on the weaponry. Now, I didn't start this video to attack black people. I'm telling black people that we have to ignore all statistics. Why the hell do we trust statistics that was given during Malcolm X's time? Given that was done after the Civil War. And why would we even believe that? Right? As if some of the government officials in the North wasn't in cahoots and conspiring with some of the South. We know that they were, because some of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence died mysterious deaths after they did. How would their whereabouts be so known to Southern rebels? There was moles and snitches on the inside of the Northern government telling those Southern rebels where some of the people of the signing of independence would be. I forget. I think John Adams died a mysterious death. John, who signed the Declaration of Independence, mysteriously poisoned. I think he was poisoned. They believe now he was. Okay? So my point, he cruised in the North but got poisoned. No, there was people in the North who were still for the South. Just because somebody lives somewhere don't mean that they for the rules and the law there. People don't want to argue with me on this because they scared. Oh, she know too much. Well, we need to know. We need to know a lot as Black people with our history, so we will know that we're trusting. We're trusting stuff we shouldn't be trusting. People love to talk about. Some of the white people, like Julian, love to talk about slavery. My problem is they never want to get into the undocumented cases. They never want to, they don't know that it wasn't about just whipping people and owning people. It was about thinking you can do it and don't care about their needs. Thinking you can do it without any gratitude and appreciation of their slavery. Thinking that you can pay them almost 95% less than the work value of the work they're doing. The presidents of the old weren't all against owning people. And this is what Black people need to understand. Some of them were just trying to make sure that we don't retaliate. So they wanted us to get something for our slavery. Basically, to shut us up. So there won't be endless wars where they're losing people too. And maybe some of their family members die in the war. Because the war, first of all, the Civil War wasn't just going on the Civil War land. It was going on along the walking trails, along the fields. War was happening outside of war grounds. Random lynchings was happening during the Civil War. Raids of Black people's homes, the Black people that was left property by the slave master, their homes was robbed and stolen and things like that. So I don't know why they don't count those cases. I don't know why they don't count the cases of the Black soldiers who were marching towards where they were having the war at, and they was jumped by white rebels who was hiding in the bushes and stuff, who was tracking them down on their way to their side of the war. It wasn't like the white Southern soldiers couldn't come to the North. Some of them did come and wait to catch some of the Black soldiers off guard as they were walking to go get training to fight in the war, to catch them before they were trained. There was all type of covert, sneaky behavior to win that war. But those bodies weren't accounted for. The soldiers that was making their travels to get the training, to sign up for the war. If the KKK members or whatever their minions found out, they would catch them and burn their bodies, so no one would know that they were trying to sign up in the war. And they would just be missing persons. Missing persons forever. Because the news did not care of investigating a missing Black person during that time. Now, this is why I need to be on one of those shows. I need to be on one of those shows. I would have looked Julian in her face and say, what makes you think I will believe in statistics coming out of your mouth? You're not a descendant of my descendants. So I'm not going to sit here and just take your word as the truth. Okay? Once upon a time, my ancestors took the truth of the white master who said, my home is your home. It was a lie. The white master said that you're going to be free before I die, yet they didn't set the Blacks free until after they died. All this believing in descendant statistics from their own, no, hell no. Just like Black people fell for the trap of the Christian Bible, believed that Jesus was white. That Jesus was white, which was BS. There ain't no way he was white. There wasn't no suntan lotion around then. No. Hell to the no. And there's conveniently missing words in the Bible, strange gaps in the sentences. That Bible was tweaked and edited and republished. That's what was done. And why wouldn't it be? Once European invaded, of course, they was going to take that Bible and say, wait a minute now, we need to make sure that it serves us. This is our land now. So why, of course, there's strange gaps in the religion. Like, Jesus here was white. Jesus here was white wool. There's no such thing as wool white. White is white. White is white. Okay? So they took out the word like. So we would not believe the texture that he had. We would just think that his hair was just white. Nowhere in the color chart can you find a specific white that is a wool white. And it just amazes me that blacks is still hanging on every word in the Christian Bible when that line alone don't make no damn sense in the Bible. Don't you think it's convenient? Black people, don't you think it's convenient that numerology is being said that it's a sin? Yet it's not even spoken clearly that it is in the Bible. And Africa, Egyptian, before it was invaded, they was in the numerology. Before the Vikings was forced to accept Christianity, they were into numerology and stones. It's mighty funny that the white slave master gave it a deviation name. I don't think that was in the Bible. I do not think it was in the Bible. Because if it was in the Bible, why would some of the saints be following certain stars to do their journey? That would still be a form of deviation. That would still be a form of non-traditional spiritualism. When we look into the religion of how Jesus was born, they said they followed the Star of David or the stars or whatever. Okay, now tell me why that was accepted, but then the Bible say, no, you can't do that. Make it make sense, y'all. Make it make sense. How else did they travel? How else did they travel? How did the navigators of the boats how did they travel? They were looking at star patterns, and the star patterns resembled animals. They resembled animals. And so they learned about the animals to understand that star pattern with energy, what kind of energy and spiritual activity would go on in the sea with them under that animal star pattern. There was nothing else they could really use. Because sometimes even if the compass broke, what do you do? What do you do? And the compasses that we have today, they didn't have back then. They had to use cup of water with a needle and all type of little tricks to find out what direction they were steering their boat and everything. So instead of doing that, they realized they could use the stars. And that was before Christianity. Now, y'all, I be going off. I'm trying to understand why black people are letting books that was in the hand of their own slave master tell them how to live their life. Tell them how to do their spiritual practices. The Africans in Africa, they are now no longer practicing Christianity. Large amounts of Africans are no longer doing it. They realize something is not adding up. It's been corrupted. It's been corrupted. Now, sometimes I do videos on this topic, on this type of conversation, but I don't get much participation because people want to watch videos only if blacks are under attack. always wonder, and I try to say, if we're not living in a racist, prejudiced world, why do white people run for the hills when this conversation is brought up in live videos on my channel and other people's channels? Why do they quickly go division and go to somewhere that will find a way to minimize the obsession that they had with slaving as many groups as they could, to minimize that? And to passively say you're pulling the race card. No, actually, you are playing games with your own race card. You are manipulating your own race card, because if every time blacks say, "Let me show you the difference," and you say, "I don't want to hear it, whatever here," you don't want to hear it, then you say race card, then you are trying to play. That's vulnerable narcissism. You're trying to move the goalpost. You're trying to make sure that the goalpost can never be moved unless you move it, and you're trying to make sure that the bare minimum of disgust is what you get for what your ancestors did. Dead and dead and dead and dead and dead and dead. And how slavery is not over. It is not over. We are still slaves. I will explain. Even during slavery, the slaves was paid the bare minimum, some of them that were paid the bare minimum so they don't drop dead. According to how much money that flows in America, this makes no damn sense. Make no damn sense for blacks to be paid what they're paid. Such $3, $4, $5 under the white people. And even lower if you're a black female. All while the prices keep going up. That is creeping back. That is literally creeping back to the slavery times of Abraham Lincoln times, according to the price of the resources. If the price of the resources keep going up and the pay is not going up, we're going back to slavery. Slowly but surely. It's like a little sneak creep back. So like, oh no, that's not what we're doing. Yes, it is what you're doing. Got people doing every kind of job, work on a job, but making them have to eat canned tuna. How is that any different? How is that any different than Martin Luther King days? How is that any different? Slaves was eating canned stuff, old can from the old cellar, cans of expired food. A lot of black people are working multiple positions on their job and still eating expired canned food that they got at the food bank. If we're not going back to slavery times, then why is the food banks running out of food? Why is the food banks so busy? Why do they have to have 2-3 food banks per major city? Why do they have to have that? Why do they have to have phone calls where you can call to get food delivered, emergency food? It's going right back to the slavery time, because the government knows who's making the most money and in charge. They know what groups are. They know. And if they're not changing things for equality, it's because they're passively going back to slavery. They're passively pushing black people to unalive themselves, and I'm calling it what it is. Unalive themselves or get hooked on drugs and be no good for society, and so they end up dying an early death. And the ones that's willing to be a good rural house slave that can earn the favoritism of that, maybe they'll have a couple days a week where they're not eating canned tuna. That's what it's going back to. The slaves of Abraham Lincoln time, they was eating a lot of leftover scraps and making food, Martha Stewart type of energy out in the shack. Now it takes 2, 3 people so that it takes 2, 3 people of black people living under the same roof just so that they are not eating like the slaves did in the shacks. There is countless black people, especially black women with degrees, unemployed right now. 350,000 with degrees, some of them with degrees, a lot of them with research degrees and things like that. Unemployed. Unemployment does not cover your medical. Unemployment is based upon really, it will give you enough just to survive. That's what it does. Okay? It doesn't even give you nowhere near as much as you would normally make on your job. It's giving you enough to get food and transportation to be able to find another job. That's what it gives you. So unemployment is not even caring about whether or not you're being pushed into slavery. It doesn't even care. If slavery was long gone behind us, we would not be able to be whipped, we energetically and mentally ripped and disrespected on a job and have nowhere to run to. We're still in bondage. We're still in bondage. It's a passive bondage. It's a covert type of bondage. Period. And people are saying, well, at least they're getting something. At least there's a few blacks that's making good money. Look, there was a few blacks making good money during the Abraham Lincoln time. There was doctors. There was black doctors in New York. Okay? Doesn't mean that slavery wasn't going on. Bondage. Bondage can mean you're just getting crumbs, but working your butt off to the bone. That's still bondage. And just like during slavery times, you can be kicked out, thrown out, fired, whatever, without warning. So the rules even about not keeping your job is the same. It's just where you're working in a building outside the slave master's house. Just because the location changed don't mean the treatment's different. Now it's psychological beatings. Now it's the type of beatings that don't leave physical wounds so that it can be denied. So then we would have to rely on white therapists to say whether we've been psychologically beat up by the workplace environment dominated by toxic white managers. And you can be blacklisted. The blacklisting been around. It was around during slavery. It was around during the Gilded Age. If one white slave master said that you was a really disobedient slave, that you tried to expose them, every white owned business owner in that community would not hire you. No one would hire you. Now it's hidden out of the public eye, out of the public conversations that the blacklist exists, but it still exists. This is why there has been blacks who try to go to the EEOC on their white employers, and then they wasn't able to get a job for the next 15, 20 years. And they had to send that white employer a cease and desist letter just to be able to get hired again. If someone can put you on a blacklist and not get hired anywhere in the city, bondage, slavery bondage is still alive and well. No one should be able to do that, all because you tried to protect your civil rights. And there's white people say, I'm tired of hearing about this. Of course you're tired of hearing about this. Because if you mention you got white privilege, then you feel like you ain't done no work like the black person. Just because the white privilege wasn't said directly to your face don't mean it don't exist. Acting like you don't see the slavery bondage still going on. Blacks all pushed up in the kitchen. Blacks with degrees always in the mail room, in the basement, always in the kitchen, always in the stock room, in the stores. Most of them is in the stock room in the back, out of sight, out of mind, like like the in-house slaves, unless they were serving food. Only allowed to be seen because they was pretty. Other than that, go down in the basement and do cooking and don't be seen. Go out way out in the fields and only we should only see your back. Go upstairs and do work in the attic and sewing and ironing stuff and leave the clothes on the chair when ain't nobody around and don't be seen. It's all going on the same, but in a very covert way. And it's gotten worse. If you go into the big white company owned businesses, just do a little inventory of how many blacks you see on the main floors. Main floor visible as hosts at the front door. You don't see them as hosts at the front door. If they was if they was pushing carts and carrying stuff in, then you'll see them like they did in slavery times as butlers, as running men. We call them runners a day, but they was called footmen in the slavery times. They like to call them delivery people in the stores. People that just do everything that they need them to do. But the original name was a footman. Bring me whatever I want. When I call you, do whatever I need you to do if the service is not here. Now, the American workplace system wants everybody to be a footman. Every black person got to be a footman. Whatever I need you to run and do, you got to do. No pay raise, no nothing. What do y'all think was being done during the Gilded Age in the South? That's exactly what they were doing to blacks that they would have worked for them. Oh. Now they call it somebody to work for me to do whatever but still do what I need them to do. They're refusing to call it a footman. Run and get my clothes, run and get my food, run and get my mans, run and get my dad, blah, 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 blah. They refusing to call it that because they know, be like, wait a minute, this is still kind of like slavery because I'm not getting no tips doing all this running, and I'm doing everybody's job. This sound like, okay, that's what the footmen did during the Gilded Age. That's why they're not calling it that. They have changed the names. The American government has changed the names to protect the guilty. You know how we say, change the name to protect the innocent in writing? They have changed the name to hide the guilty in charge, to protect the guilty who's in charge. Black people, stop talking about slavery with other race groups. You know they're going to say, well, didn't you slave your own people? And then you say, if you say, well, at least I slaved my own people. You was doing it to anybody and everybody. So how is we the same? And most likely, if I slaved my own people, I highly doubt I was doing them, my ancestors was doing them the way you doing me when I'm not your people. It's easy to not have a guilty conscience when you're slaving people that's not your people. When you're slaving people that's not your race, you won't have much as compassion. You won't be triggered to have compassion because they don't look like you. And if there's other people that's around you that's your race, you may try to appease them by treating them like the other races beneath them. you will try to appease them to get on their good side if they really don't like that other race. But the natives did not have. They slaved their own people. They did not have the opportunity to not be triggered to have compassion. The trigger of compassion was always present because they're slaving someone that looks like them. And we know that people tend to have compassion of people that look like them, which is exactly why when you go on jobs, with the exception of black people who feel the need to get validation from the white managers, the other people who are white, if they see another white person doing wrong on the job, they won't say nothing. They having compassion. They won't turn them in. I have never been on a single job where the white people acting up and other white people go here to snitch. I never seen it happen. And I saw white people breaking the rules on the job, but the other white people pretend not to see. Pretend not to see. And that is proof. That is proof that if they're still in that energy today on the job, I can imagine the energy that their ancestors were in when they had their own race working for them. I'm sure they were nicer, and I'm sure they was more compassionate than they were for their black slaves. Just like the natives was more compassionate for their own native slaves. I've never ever seen in my life any non-black person quick to call out the toxic behavior of their fellow white person right in front of black people. I've never seen it happen. Never seen it happen. So I know darn well it's only in human nature to be more compassionate to your own race when you know your race has the power. The Native Americans knew they had the power. They wasn't invaded by white people yet. So I'm sure they had more compassion for their own Native American slaves. I tell people I am a brilliant and very deep thinker, and I'm good at figuring BS out. I've never heard a white person on a job say somebody snitched on them. Never heard that. I've seen plenty of white people act up, throw things on a job, break things, cuss and have inappropriate behavior, and it's like they're untouchable. So there was also lack of equality in treatment with how they treated their own white workers versus how they treated the black workers. And it's still going on. That means slavery still exists. Lack of equality is still existing. If I get treated worse than another slave because their race is different than mine, we are still dealing with slavery energy times. We're still in those times. There is too many damn signs that we are still in them times. Just because the address changed don't mean the treatment got better. Just because the method of abuse has changed don't mean that the abuse went away. Just because we are paid through the government don't mean the lack of equal pay doesn't exist, and that we're getting paid just wages, fair wages for our work. Changing the process doesn't change the damn treatment. Changing the process of the delivery of the treatment don't mean that the treatment is not as bad anymore and it doesn't exist. That is literally covert manipulation. That's what that is. Well, we gave you a chance. We give you a chance. We let one black person make it to the top. Look, they did that during slavery too. That's nothing new. That's nothing new. There was always that one slave that was given a nice bedroom that, might have served 20 years on the slave master's house. So they was allowed to live in the bedroom. They was allowed to eat food from the kitchen. Look, that's nothing new. Tokenism, blackism has been around since Abraham Lincoln. So when people use that as evidence that, like, okay, we got affirmative action. Look, there was always a fake affirmative action to disguise, to misdirect people from the slavery going on, to cast an illusion, to make it seem like the slavery is not that bad. Maybe you'll minimize it a little bit because we let one through. We let one get to the second floor of the house. They might have not made it to the master bedrooms, but they made it to the second floor. See, we ain't that racist anymore. We're not that racist anymore. But oh yeah, okay, then why the heck did that go on during slavery too? If you're doing the same shit just in a different location, you can't say that it's less racist than before. Still the same racism. Y'all, I call it what it is. I could debate. But I tell people, you want to argue with me about this? Go ahead and argue with me about this. They didn't raise the prices of patenting and copyrighting your stuff because they know by blacks being the lowest paid, they can't afford to copyright their work. Who the hell can afford to copyright one chapter of their book for $40? I mean, only people that can do that is black people that's pulling in at least $100,000 and don't got no kids. Copyrights and patents can take months and loads of money. They purposely closed the patent office down during when a lot of inventions were being created, and we know that there was major inventions being created by black people, like the movie Hidden Figures and all that. All of a sudden, they closed the patent office, and then some of those inventions of black people sat around in here, and the black people died, and they sold the inventions that were sitting in the patent office. They sold them to white people that could buy them off the patent office. And then the black people said, what happened to my invention? How come I didn't get a patent? They kept on adding all these additional steps to patent your work. There was like 3 steps during the Gilded Age. And they added more during the Emancipation Proclamation period. They realized that it wasn't enough to make blacks go dirt poor just to get their stuff patented. They knew they couldn't. They knew that it wasn't the amount. It's like they made it so that you had to even be in a club just to get your stuff patented. Like, oh, it costs $100 to be in a club membership, patent, and all this other stuff. There's been a lot of manipulation just to let black people be able to be profiting business owners of their own inventions. Which is why some of the slave masters end up sharing some of the rights because they was able to afford to pay for the patent. So they said to the black slaves, if I pay for this patent, I want my name to go down on it. So we have no way to even tell how many of us is actually supposed to get generational wealth from some of these inventions. We don't know. We don't know. So all about saying that bondage is not, it's still going on. You got to be almost financially stable just to be able to create prototypes of your invention and get all the patents and be able to get an attorney in case somehow it gets stolen at the patent office or through the process. And the attorney is going to sit up there and want an expensive retainer uh, amount to, just for a consultation, since they're going to estimate how much you would probably profit in the first year off that invention. So let's say you get an attorney. Like, let's say black people say, I'm not going to work on the slave chain no more. 9 to 5 job because it's still bondage. I'm going to go and invent something. You still got to afford an attorney. Because if it gets stolen through the process of the patent office, how you gonna win? And the patent office people, the processors, believe me, they can afford better attorneys than you. If you're starting off as a small business owner trying to get your stuff patented, the patent office is going to come with attorneys 10 times better than yours. They can research your race. They can research your race and find out your race and all that when you submit those inventions. So it's not like we can all just like, oh, if you don't, if you don't like the 9 to 5 job bondage, then quit. Do something else. But our work is constantly being stolen, even on TikTok. And you got to afford an attorney to get your money. And frankly, if you can afford an expensive attorney, then you're probably well off without the invention. Y'all, this is the truth. If you can afford a $200,000, $400 an hour attorney, then you're probably well off without even getting the patent of the invention. So you got to be well above middle class to even get possibly rich off an invention. I know a guy that has a wonderful invention, and so did his wife. I have invention ideas. I came up with one really good one. I got to be able to afford an attorney that they can afford. It's like, why even do it? Unless I sell the idea. If I sell the idea, then the rich white people that bought it, they're going to pay me a lot less because they're going to know that I'm desperate to get something out of my idea. They're going to take it to someone who's going to estimate the profits, some sort of researcher, financial researcher, or even someone wise with the stocks, how much it might even make in the stocks. And so they're going to pay me a low percentage and expect also for no one to even know that I came up with the idea. So I'll be sitting around the rest of my life. Nobody knows I invented it with only a 10% profit, pre-profit off the idea. While the 90% is going to the rich white person that bought it off of me. All so I can get around paying high attorney fees and attorney on standby and patent fees. And patents, when you patent your stuff, it doesn't mean it's patent forever. Yeah. So it's when people say, well, leave. If you don't like the way the slave master do you on a 9 to 5 job, okay. But how can I make it out here as a business owner, a broke business owner? You need a lot of money to make money. To create a product that's protected. There's no sense in even creating a product if it's not protected. Especially if you're a minority group, you better off not. You better what? Somebody racist is not going to have a problem with taking it from you. They're going to be happily take it from you. Glad that they found you to take it from. Black people need to do this until you get enough money to at least get a cheap lawyer. If you can find a lawyer that would defend you for cheap, and you can really afford it, then you might as well just go ahead and die with that invention. Take it to the grave, unless you're willing to sell your name and your all your rights to somebody that can afford an attorney and the patents. Because some of the invention patents require you also to pay to get your invention up to safety code. All the different licenses for that. This is why in the Gilded Age, some of the black people that invented things, they was going to rich white people and asking them to front some of the money. Front the money. But they became a understudy of their own damn product. And people can say, oh, well, if you don't like it with America, leave. Why do I have to leave somewhere that my ancestors was born and raised over hundreds of years? Why do I have to leave? And, okay, if we leave, how do I know that your ancestors came from America? How do I know that your ancestors was from a different country? Why don't you leave? If you don't like me saying I don't like it here and you're sick of hearing my mouth, why don't you leave? Like Jane Elliott said, the flight goes both ways. Also, why am I going to go? Where can I go? You say leave, I don't like it here. You dominated Africa too. You all up in Africa. So, okay, tell me where to go. Tell me where to go to escape this covert oppression. Where can I go? I can only go off the edge of the earth that your race say is flat. You want me to go find a way to leap off the edge of the earth so I don't never have to go anywhere else again? You want me to do that? And why do I gotta go back to a country? You say go to Africa. How do you know my ancestors wasn't already here and put in bondage? It's amazing how the race groups love to tell black people where their ancestors came from, as if they're holding the genealogy report in their hand. It's like really wild. It's like really wild that people are so narcissistic that think they can say that. Like, I know automatically that your ancestors came from Africa. But even if we did go back to Africa, a lot of the Africans don't consider me actually African. So you're trying to make me go somewhere. You're trying to make me go somewhere among people who can tell that I didn't grow up with their roots. You're trying to make me go somewhere that's still running like the time before civilization, where there's no plumbing and things like that. While you sit up here and benefit from my inventions in America, my ancestors' inventions, my race inventions, you love it up. While I'm sitting up there in Africa and living before any of the inventions came around, the central need inventions. Oh, okay. You would love for me to leave. You would love for me to leave so you can peacefully benefit from the inventions of my race, and you can do it in peace and not hear my mouth. I think it's very so covert to say if you don't like it here, leave. Why don't you leave? You obviously don't like my mouth. You obviously have a problem with me saying something. You don't want to hear me. Why don't you leave? When I don't want to hear somebody, I leave. I don't tell them to leave. If I don't want to hear you in your own home, I'm leaving. Okay? If you are a part of the colonizer, the European race, you're actually living in a home that's of color. Okay? That's of color. So if you don't like what I'm saying, it's actually you who got to leave. When people sit up on this channel and try to say, oh, Miss V It's a bit witch and a coon. I say I can prove to you I'm not a coon. I will go on this channel and do videos like this. I know this much because I'm not a coon. I highly doubt my grandfather George was a house slave. My grandfather George was dark skinned, real dark. He was a field slave. Okay? Now his mother was my complexion, kind of light brown. And in the report, the document, she was actually a house slave. But her son, my grandfather, was a field slave. Now her sister, my aunt, my great aunt Cassie, she was definitely a house slave because she only had one arm. There's no way she was out there picking cotton, keeping up with the quota with one arm. I highly doubt it. So she was probably somebody that just did a little bit of work around the house or maybe babysitted the kids. You know, she probably was a mammy or whatever. You know, when you look at the slaves and you look at the condition that they're in and you look at their disabilities, you can pretty much guess what jobs they had. And when you look at their skin color, in the painting of my ancestors, and when the black and white photography came out, and my grandfather was able to be photographed, you know, because he lived long enough to see the black and white photography, and he moved to the north. His slave master died. So he was free because the slave master died, my grandfather George. So he moved to the north, and then black and white photography, you know, the big bulb light flash stuff came out. So they do have a picture on my genealogy Facebook page where I can see what he looked like at least. There ain't no audio. Audio wasn't out yet. But I can see what he looked like, and I'm like, no, he was definitely, when he was 17, a 17-year-old slave, he was definitely a field slave. He was definitely. And as strong as he looked and so much in shape, he was probably used for manual labor. And I can pretty much guess, I'm sure some of the white people in that home, white women probably was attracted to him because he had very strong, attractive Native American type of look to him. You know, his bone structure was strong. So I'm sure that was, you know, that spoke strength to some of the white young women who probably wish they could, you know, get with him at that time. But he did not choose. He chose my grandmother, I think Ella. Her name was Ella, and she was also brown skinned. She was like almost dark skinned. So he actually kept black, you know, of color in our family. It wasn't until it was his son that got with some woman who was mixed. But my grandfather, who was a slave, he had a child by somebody that was dark, a darker skinned woman, and he was dark skinned. It was normal during Malcolm X time for some black men to prefer light skinned women. So, of course, that was normal for my great grandmother's husband to choose her. I'm not saying that he only choose her because her light skin, but I noticed that after that part of my family tree, all the grandmothers are light skinned, and all the men are brown skin or dark skinned. But my great grandfather up the tree was a slave. He did not choose a light skinned woman. If it wasn't for my last two grandmothers, I would probably be darker if they were darker. Hi, everybody. Somebody said teach. um, uh, During the time of Martin Luther King, it was normal for black men to creep around with biracial women and reap the benefits that they brought to the table. And we know this from some of the movies that we have seen. Okay, that we have seen. It was starting to become more acceptable in the North for a black man to walk down the street with a biracial woman. So, or a mixed woman. So, that's what happened to my family tree. At some point, it went biracial mixed, and it was like it was I guess during the Korean War times. During the war, Holocaust, in my family, it was all black. My family was like dark skinned. Okay, my grandmother was dark skinned. Uh, Her husband was dark because all her kids, most of her kids, besides my mother, was dark. However, there's been said that my grandmother didn't want my mother's father, and he was lighter. She actually did. She actually wanted. Uh, she would wanted to be with I guess, a dark skinned guy. So it is whatever is whatever. It's amazing how when TV came around, people started choosing different partners. Before there was like television, people was like not that colorist of their own race. Okay? Before there was television, there was not that much colorism in the black community. Because when my grandfather chose a dark skinned woman and he dark skinned, there was no TV at the time. There was no TV. There was no big ads, in the all around them, over publicized of the beauty being closer to the European standards. It wasn't a lot of ads outside. Actually, the advertisements that was outside was for shows and events. So if you saw a picture of a beautiful biracial or white woman, it was normally because she was doing a show, she was doing an opera. If it was a painting or a drawing of her, it was like, oh, because she was like, if it's an artistic painting, she was supposed to put on a show or something. Now you see these advertisements for any old reason. Any old reason. Okay? At some point, black people was able to at least afford, in the North, they was able to afford hand-me-down TVs or used TVs, which they fixed themselves. And that became a major influence on what type of partner their kids would choose, this next generation would choose. This is why Amish people don't allow TVs in their village. It's too much mental influence of their culture and their race. Too much influence on it. Here's my thing. How can people say, if black people are sick of us or whatever, why don't y'all just go and team together? How can we do that when so many of us has been brainwashed by the marketing? You're giving us options that are not really available, that wouldn't even work if we tried. Even if we team together, so much fear has been put and passed down generation, and so much insecurities is in the black community that some would be like, no, I can't. That, unless they knew there was a major profit they was going to get, there'll be black people saying, no, I can't team up with you. Some of them like that they got their privilege from their skin color and their hair texture. They'll never say it out loud because it would be disgusting. But some of them know that they got privilege with that. And they're just happy to be able to have some privilege. They feel a little safer. They feel a little bit freer in society. Now, the truth is that at this point with the black population, we must scatter. We must scatter and go where we have our own privileges like everybody else is doing in America. Somewhere I got 4C here privilege. Maybe it's in Jamaica. Maybe it's in parts of Barbados. Maybe it's in parts of deep Africa. Maybe. Okay, my privilege is there. But what about the rest of the privileges I want this in America that my own race gave me? What about accessing that? Here in America, people can use their race and culture skin privilege on top of the technology privileges and the other privileges and the other privileges. If we blacks scatter and go where we have race privileges, it doesn't mean we're going to have access to the other Americanized privileges. So some of us is like, there's no point. What? I might have a privilege of where I might get a better partner, I might get compliments, I might get desired, but I don't got the other privileges of like indoor plumbing and things like that, of having a washer and dryer, things like that, of being able to shower with a shower curtain and shower head, not having to worry about sweating all day or whatever, things like that. Being able to customize my diet. I might not be able to because where I'm living, there's just one type of diet. The culture is there. So telling black people to just leave is not going to work. It's just not going to work. Telling us to team together is not going to work. But we can all choose what privileges we're willing to sacrifice to have other privileges. However, the dominant race does not have to do that. They're able to have all privileges. That's the difference. They got beauty privileges. They got work privileges. They got advertisement privileges. They got social respect privilege. The other race groups that are non-black, especially the white and the Asian, they got way more privileges than we got. We don't even got social privileges because there's a such thing as called black rage. If we get upset with somebody, then the documented phrase black rage will be used to influence the judge's decision of us getting upset with people on these streets who do us wrong. It will influence even the way police treat us. They know the law. They know the law stereotypes that have been approved for black people in a negative way, like black rage. Where's white rage? Why isn't there white rage? We got plenty of white mass shooters, and that's not in the dictionary. Why is there no phrase called anti-black, but there's anti-Semitic? No one can say a single bad thing about Jewish people, but everyone can say whatever they want about black people, and there's no anti. There's homophobic for LGBTQ, but there's no blackophobic. And we know blackophobic is alive and well. We can't even show up with an unhappy face, or we might be a problem. We can't even show up. We can't even show up in a not so happy mood, or blackophobia comes out of people. People pull their kids closer. People get a little bit worried. People want to shut down and get quiet and freeze. But there's no blackophobic. You know what my problem is? Stereotypes and negativity phrases exist, but we don't even have equality with that. If we're not going to get equality on fair treatment, can we get equality with the negative phrases? Can we get equality with that? Because no, honky doesn't have a bad reputation. Honky means, they eat fried cabbage and pig in a blanket, and they might be a little bit of a roughneck or a countryman or redneck. That's what that means. But the N word, there ain't nothing but negativity attached to that. Nothing but negativity. Can we get dirty fighting equality? We don't even have that. Okay, nobody wants to fight clean. Nobody wants to fight black people clean. All right, good, good, good. Okay. If you're fine, if you're gonna say we pulling a race card, why can't we say you pulling a race privilege card? You're pulling the race victim card. Why can't we say you're pulling the race privilege card? Statistics support the race privilege. Work placement support it. Why ain't a lot of you working in the kitchen when you get off welfare? If white people are the most race group on welfare, how are y'all skipping working in the kitchen? How come when y'all get jobs, y'all not janitors? How can you go from being on welfare and drugs for 5 years sometime, years, and then when someone asks you what job you got, I'm working as a receptionist. I'm working as a bookkeeper. They trained me. No, you don't get to train as a bookkeeper. You get to train as a janitor. That's what you get to train. But train as. But when a black person's on drugs for years and they've been rehabilitated, first of all, they don't even get free rehabilitation half the time unless they are LGBTQ. Now, they got to get a little part-time job or work something under the table to afford the rehabilitation medication or buy the medication, rehab medication out on these streets. And then when they get clean and they get a job and they get all the weed out their system and get a job, they get a janitor job. That's what they get. That's what black people get. I have talked to white people. Do you have a degree? Well, wait a minute. You ain't do this job in 10 years, but yeah, you got an activity assistant job working directly under the director. You're 19 years old working as an assistant director. And I done 10 years. done 10 years. And I can't be an assistant director in this position. That's white privilege. I worked at a nursing home where it was clearly white privilege. The white girl was 19 years old, still in college, going to college for something totally not related. She was given her own floor to be a director of, an assistant director to the main director. She was treated like she was a princess and a queen. I came in here and had experience all the way from 14 years old in her job. I was older than her. I was almost 30. I had put in years in that position. And you know what they did? They treated me like crap. You know what they did? They kept me out of all the emails. I wasn't allowed to use the computer. I wasn't allowed to use the phone. From day one, I wasn't. But this woman didn't have my experience. She didn't even have my business degree. And she was able to use the phone, the email, and everything, every resource that the director used. She was able to handle all the social clients and all that. I had to be seen and not heard, even though my badge say the same thing her badge say. So no one's going to tell me that white privilege don't exist. It does exist. A lot of black people have stories telling us it don't exist. Why not just shut up and ask us, how do we know it exists? And we will tell you our stories. But it's like we aren't allowed to have stories as proof and evidence. Only the stories, only what the white privileged people haven't been told about their privilege, they the only ones that get to share their stories. And if you bring it up around a house Negro, The House Negro will say, well, white people's not trying to leave their jobs, give up their white privilege, so why are you talking about it? But then when you ask the House Negro, okay, so what job do you have? Oh, I'm working directly under the CEO. Okay, shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. You're trying not to rub them the wrong way. That's what you're doing. You're tap dancing around the truth. You want to make it seem like it's useless for us to say something because they're not going to give up their job, so we're wasting our time. Instead of showing compassion, the House Negroes don't show compassion and say, well, this isn't right, and there needs to be more investigation into why people are being hired. There needs to be some sort of inspection to compare the hiring resumes, to compare them. There needs to be an inspector just for that. Every year during hiring season, inspect the comparison of the resumes and the references. But that's not going to happen because that would probably require a tax fee. And black people say, I don't want no more taxes. I definitely don't. I definitely don't. So no one's going to vote for that. That's going to come out of our checks. They're not going to send the inspector for that for free. They are already sending the affirmative action people inspectors for free. The site inspectors. So they're like, no. Next one's coming out your taxes, because that is something that we really don't want to do. The American government said we really don't want to do. We want to keep this secret. Because if we do that, there's going to be a lot of big companies that end up being sued. We're going to have mass suing going on in our company, and then possibly companies losing money from the suits, and we cannot afford to have such mass resources being shut down from lawsuits, because my white population will suffer from that too. See, the thing is, when people try to passively oppress you, they're also thinking long term with any decisions they would make if you expect them to make to create equality. Even if we went to protest and say we need this and this and that to get equality, the government is going to think long term how that will affect the economy, that would affect their own race. We're living in an opportunist world, and the politicians is not an exception. They also will use their race privileges if they can. If it would bring them more money, more power, they would. I say, okay, if they would, okay, because they already are. They already are. That's why it's very hard for someone of color to climb in Congress. To climb all the way to the top after all these years after Abraham Lincoln. You would think that we would have had at least one person that was willing to admit they got black in them, that they black up in there. Don't you think we should? Of color? I'm not talking about African. I'm talking about of color that could maybe the people that was already here. Don't you think we need at least one person to prove that America is trying to change its ways? We need at least one black person. One black person to make it at the top. Before this economy gets so bad, the country gets so bad, that if you did put a black person in there, it would only be to blame all the problems on the black person. We don't need a black president anymore. Why would we want to put the burden of this trifling country's condition on the shoulders of a black person who probably had to work so many years of proving that they're worthy to climb extra harder, the burden of being better than every other race just to climb a little bit? Like the one military lady told her, we have the burden of having to be better. Having to be better just to be equal. It sounds like it don't make sense, but it do. Better is equal. Better is equal. But better comes with a heavy price, tiptoeing and walking on eggshells. And if we put a black person in as a president in 5 years, if things don't work out, they're gonna say, "Oh, told you we should have put them in there." But yet things got worse with white presidents, and nobody said that. Nobody said when things got real trifling, when Clinton with his trifling behavior, and Nixon with his trifling behavior, and Reagan with his full of crap butt, and Bush with his self-sensationalized self. Nobody said things got better then when all the grants were being cut in college when Bush Sr. got in office. Nobody said, see, Bush didn't do nothing. There's people that still like I'm for Bush. In spite of the fact that we still have grants attached to our taxes. You think they attach grants to the taxes to for white people too? No, they're fully aware that white people are dominating the acceptance in the college. They are fully aware that they can afford to pay off of 100, that they have generational wealth, that they have family members and parents who are in high paying positions. They can afford to pay off their college tuition. They very well know that a lot of black people got to slowly chop away that college grant. That college loan. So they purposely attach the loans to the taxes of black people. So they don't get to decide how much to pay. You got to pay what the loan people say pay, regardless if your employer is discriminating against your paycheck, regardless if you're getting unfair wages. You still have to pay your college loan. Well, what we say you got to pay, or we take your taxes. Now, when that happens, then the underpaid black people cannot afford to get their teeth cleaned, cannot afford to get very important essential needs, which means to start to make it hard for them to keep their job. And then if they get fired due to being unprofessional with their lack of essential needs, like having front teeth in their mouth, they don't have that no more. They can't afford it. They paying off college loans that they thought they were going to be able to pay off quick once they got that job in that field. And so they get fired because, hey, you're not the image of our company anymore. So black people leave. That's what they're told. That's what they're told. And then they have trouble finding other jobs because you're not the image of the next company or the next company and next company. You could not get the hair treatments you were supposed to get. You couldn't get the teeth replacements you needed to get. You couldn't get the health plan for your obesity, for your jacked up cortisol that I caused as a white slave master. I made you obese through jacking up your cortisol, slaving you out while giving you crumbs. Wondering if you're going to be able to afford to even get to work. I did that to you, but you're still not the image of my company. You're not. Look at you. Can't afford to keep your hair done every month. And you know I cannot stand that texture in my company. I'm telling it how it is. This is how it goes. This is how black people say get to a point that even with masters, they say F it. Let me just go ahead and stick on welfare. I might as well. That's what they keep pushing me towards. I'm trying to get ahead. I'm trying. But it's like a whole bunch of manipulative chessboard tactics to keep pushing me right back to the welfare line and unemployment line. Right when I think I've escaped it. Right when I think. All of a sudden, because I'm making a little bit more than what the free clinics say I should make. A little bit more. According to how many people in my household. Because $40,000 should be able to take care of 3 people. No matter what you do to the economy, white government. You can do whatever you want to this economy. $40,000 should be able to take care of 3 people. So I can't get my essential needs taken care of, nothing. I got to call off work to go stand in the free food bank line. And then worry about if I'm going to go back and have a job, because they don't give a damn if I had to call off to go to the food bank. They don't give a damn. Somehow I'm supposed to pull money out of my butt. Taking care of 3 people and $40,000. And I have a whole master's degree. Y'all. And people say, well, there's plenty of white people on welfare. But why do I see white people on welfare living in big, beautiful homes? You don't go to the ghettos and see a whole bunch of white people. You don't. Where is these white people living on welfare? Oh, yeah, they're living off their grandmother who own a home. They staying in their grandmother who own a home, and they're getting their welfare check, and they're not on her lease. They're not on the mortgage papers of that home. They're not. And they're using somebody's address, some other welfare person's address, some old abandoned building address, some other address. Or they're living in a home that their grandmother left them when she died, and they're on welfare, living comfortably in their generational home. Yeah. They say, I could be on welfare. I'm living in a generational home. I don't got no rent to pay. I don't have no rent to pay. I'll just go ahead and say I'm trying to find a job, and I'll just keep on saying that and keep getting my welfare. I'm trying to understand why welfare is such a negative word when black people say they want it. Where's the equality with that? Why do I get tomato energy? People throw tomatoes at me energetically if I say I'm on welfare. Now, I'm not on welfare, but if I was, whoo, I think I'd be better off. Because I just don't want to play the game anymore. I don't want to play the game. Being whipped to death just to be able to afford one dentist appointment a year. I don't want to play the game anymore. I mean, as much as I played the toxic racist game, it's like, you know what? Cool. I'm cool. You know, to be honest, the best thing that black women can do is get married. I know. This black woman will be like, nah, I'm good. You're going to need that Social Security that your man's getting. Don't act like you're not going to need it. Your job is not safe. It's a whole lot less safe. You're a black woman. Saying I'm good because I'm currently making $100,000 a year. Oh, we see the black women got a wake-up call when $350,000 was recently laid off. No, you work your job, you make money, and you get your husband. If he act up, you don't get mad, you get everything. You don't get mad, you get everything just like the white woman do. If the black man do you wrong, any damn man do you wrong, you don't get mad, you get everything. You get what you can according to how you was done wrong. But if they ain't doing you wrong, if they ain't doing you wrong, stay in the marriage. And when he drop dead, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to outlive him anyway. Women are most likely outlive men. At least you can live off your disability check and your own your social security check from your job and his. Get married as soon as possible. As soon as possible. As early as possible. So his social security piles up and piles up and piles up and piles up, and the kids leave home. And now when you get your social security, it's going to be all yours. Your kids is grown and on their own. It's going to be all yours. Marriage is not just about fun and games and lovey-dovey stuff. It's about securing your future wealth. This is why the Gilded Age, the women understood that. They understood that this is a man's world and it was really fixed against them. And they needed to make sure they can get some of that man's money and not just see love as just a potential thing of us possibly just being together. Look, I'm not going to get Social Security disability, your Social Security from your work check by sleeping with you in casual sex. I'm not getting anywhere with that. And the more I do that, I don't do it, but I'm just saying, as example, the more I do that, the more I become energetically undesirable to a man that's looking to have a wife. The less class I have, I don't put out a class vibe energy. I'm not going to attract a man that knows if he marries me, I'm going to get money when he die. I'm going to have everything that he have. I am next of kin, first of kin. I am wife. And I'm going to make sure that he does the will would have by the time half his life is over. And I'm going to make sure that it's notarized, and I'm going to make sure that I know where it's at and I keep it. Period. Because the truth of the matter, this is to all the black women, this society is really fixed against you, and it's 10 times more fixed against you when you get old. So you get what you can get in those relationships while you're young, and you save it and you put it away. Most of the money that your man give you as you're in your 30s and 40s, it's not for fun and games. It's actually his money that he give you is for you to put away when the day that he die. That's what that money is for. Your money, you can play with your money, but his money is in case SHIT happened to this man. Why settle for your money only when you can settle for his money too? You know that your age is going to limit of what you can get. It always do as a woman. And the day you just accept that and stop thinking you're going to push through and you're going to beat this system, you're not. We're outnumbered in every way. We're outnumbered in the power. We're not outnumbered with conception, but we're outnumbered with the power. And they're never going to let us. It's going to be another 10, 20 years before we get even close to being almost equal in power. Close. And if some of y'all are already 30, that means that in about 10 to 15 years, you're going to be middle age. You're going to be middle age. And the money going to come in much slower. Your employer is going to be more toxic towards you. You ain't that much of a sight to see to them. Not compared to the 20-year-olds coming in. You are not that much a good entertainment distraction from their workday. The employers, they're not going to see you as that. You're not going to be much as a fun bag. I don't care how slim, thin, fine you are. Look, I'm fine for my age. And I see the difference, okay? I didn't get no Botox and all that, and my face is pretty as J-Lo's. And she got every kind of work she got done. If I look the way I look at this age, I know how good I'm going to look at her age. That I'm not going to need no Botox. I'm never going to need no Botox with these cheekbones. And I still see the change in the respect for me, even when I don't do anything wrong. But I was wise to make sure that no matter what happened, what went on, If I can work past it, if I can forgive in my marriage, I can. Because I'll be damned if I gave up the best years of my life and some other woman gets the Social Security. No. If another woman's gonna get his Social Security, best believe I'm leaving this marriage. I'm leaving this marriage with my hands full to the brim, overflowing. I'm leaving this marriage I'm the Grinch that then robbed everybody's house. That's how big my bags are going to be. Cause I can't get my years back, and I know ain't nobody coming to make up for them years for me. No man is coming for a divorced woman to make up for those years. So I'm telling black women, stop glamorizing being single. You see how so many of y'all got blindsided, running on unemployment, 38 years old and don't got no husband. What was you thinking? You're just going to sit on that job for 15, 20 years and just hope times never change, and that they'll look past your aging and not want to replace you. Let's get real here. I already know there's women that's not going to agree with me with this, that marriage ain't for everybody. It's for the system. It's for the system. That's how you win as a woman. That's how you guarantee that you are a top finalist in the game of life. That's how you do it. And you can say this is baby boomer talk all you want, but they the ones sitting up there with the houses and the 3 cars. You can say it all you want. The women who was in this energy in the Gilded Age in the 50s, they said they comfortable. I know women in their 60s who said they were married and their husbands died. They sitting in their beautiful homes and they sitting with their cars and they sitting with their fat bank accounts and saying, you don't like my old butt, but guess what? My bank account do. So I'm good. Now, hope that you got where I'm getting. And women say, why get married when I be abused? You be abused, get everything. How about that one? How about that one? Just roll up out, sue, and get your money. Maybe the abuse was a blessing. Yeah, you can profit from abuse. You can profit a whole lot as a woman from abuse. And I feel like this. If you're a woman in today's economy, you get you a man that's almost making 3 figures. He better be pretty close. He better be pretty close. If you are making at least high number 2 figures, like 70,000 and up, if you're making that, then you can afford to be with a man that's making almost 3 figures. You cannot afford to be with a man only making 20,000. His security, it's not going to pile up good. It's not going to be a big pile. Okay, and $20,000 jobs are replaceable, very replaceable. That's retail jobs. That's janitor jobs. Those are highly replaceable jobs. So you're very replaceable in those jobs. So if you get a man only making 30,000, and that's what he would probably make for years and years and years and years off that job, and he ain't buying no property, and he ain't inheriting nothing in the first, I'd say the first 10 years of your marriage. You might need to end it and get somebody that's making more money. I'm just saying, y'all. That security's not gonna be that fat. He would have had to work since he was a teenager for 20, 30 years for that to be a fat security check in case when the day that he retires or dies. So the marriage is not good of an investment. 9 times out of 10, you're probably still going to have to work a good paying job to survive. My daughters boyfriend, and I'm mad at her because she keep on being comfortable with saying boyfriend. She doesn't understand that she's not married to him, so she's not first of kin. Now, if they live together another few years, then she can use common law. She can use common law marriage. Okay, she can. Like on the movie Frankie Valentine or something. I think that movie with Holly Berry. The one girl won on common law. I think you gotta be living with somebody at least 6 to 8 years or something for that. And you gotta prove that y'all was living together the whole time. Now her boyfriend makes over 100,000, and she makes, I think, without her tips, she makes a lot of good money in her tips, and she does a lot. She makes more money now. She's a manager, so her salary is increased too. But she's glamorizing them just living together. And if he happens to leave before the common law marriage time up, she ain't getting a dime of his. So if something happens to him when he leaves before that time, she's not getting no checks. So if she has to cover some bills that he was covering in their house, she's going to be screwed. She's going to have to move out and move back in with me. She's not future thinking about her finances. Now, people might not do future thinking in other things, but future thinking is required when it comes to your finances if you're a woman. Okay? A woman's time is one of her biggest investment. You have to not waste it at all. I told my daughter, 30-year max. 30 years. That's it. I told her, I said, if y'all are not married, and if the flame ain't going real good, if his income is not increasing, okay, his income is not increasing. He ain't putting in no money he ain't putting in no request for raises. You probably gonna be stuck with a man making that same damn amount to the day you die, all while the economy is getting worse and the prices are going up. So his money is not even going to be that good. In about 10 years' time, that $100,000 or $150,000 is going to be like he's only making $50,000. A lot more of your money is going to be having to put in for bills and medical, which is going to get more expensive as you age. Your dental bill gets higher the older you get. But right now, she doesn't have the essential need bills that I have. So she's glamorizing the money that they have right now. Women don't realize you go to bed 25 and then one day you wake up 55. It goes by that fast when you are working yourself to death because your man cannot afford to give you the freedom that you need with your youth. It goes by that fast. The working world takes your years in a wink of an eye. The 9-to-5 world. Now, as older generation will tell you this all day, and people say, I heard this 1,000 times, but guess what? How many 25-year-olds watching this video can remember just yesterday you was in high school? Now, if it seemed like it flew already, then guess what? Get ready for it to fly even faster when you're in your 30s and 40s and you're chasing shit. It's going to go even faster. But why it's going so fast, you need to be able to not chase things as fast. So you need to let the man do that. So not only when he finally make enough money and his security to leave you when he die, you still look good spending his money while he's dead. You still look good. You still want to go out and do things in the public because you still look good with the money. This might sound like outdated knowledge, but it's more important now. Since your $100,000 as a woman ain't a big deal no more. It's not. We got men making that in 5 months on YouTube. Your $100,000 a year is nothing compared to what some of these men are making. We have way more men making way more money than they did in the 1950s, and still able to go clubbing on the weekends and still able to go to the gym. Okay? They're online with their private businesses and side hustles. Your youth, your youth is one of your greatest abundance. You're allowed to use it. Use it well, though. Because this world loves to serve you when you're youthful looking. Even if you're a black woman and you got youth, you got privilege. That's a privilege. Beauty is a privilege. But that's a privilege that fades before your eyes, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because at some point, there's going to be nothing you can do about it. If you're the lucky ones like Angela Bassett, you'll get to keep your youth almost till you're 60. Now her youth is fading real fast because she can't train like she used to. Her body's retaining more water because she's at the age she's at. So now she's getting Botox and all kind of stuff. The privileges that you have for your gender, black people need to use. Okay? Black people need to, even for your sexuality, you LGBTQ and you black, use it. Use the privilege. Use it up. Use it up. And don't be afraid, because your oppressors, they're using their privilege. Okay? Whatever privilege you got as a black person, use it. You got intelligent privilege, don't waste it. You got sense of humor privilege. Having a sense of humor is a privilege. Not everybody funny. Use it. The last thing you should be doing is wasting privileges when you're black. That is abominable. I think that every black person need to sit down and do a whole mind dump on their privileges. Just literally, like, what is my, ask somebody, what privilege you think I got compared to what the people you always see? You didn't see a lot of. I'm mad that I didn't take advantage of my eye privilege. I didn't know I had eye privilege. I thought everybody had eyes like me. I really didn't know I had any eye privilege until I started noticing people always want to talk about my eyes. And I said, okay, I must get eye privilege then. But it was later in the years, because I was chasing money the old fashioned way, the way everybody else was. I wasn't paying attention to my own personal privileges. Like, I have gray hair privileges. I have silver hair privilege. When I go to the salon, my silver is always brighter than everybody else's there. I have less yellow in my hair than I see other people. So I'm going to get toners into my curls. I'm going to get a toner, high-end shampoo, and I'm going to have them lighten some of the gray that is yellow and even brighten the gray even more. That way my privileged gray is at a maximum, and it looks really fierce against my glowing skin. It looks fierce with the coils then. I have gray hair privilege in my age range. Among other empresses, I have gray hair privilege. I think that we need to get familiar with our privilege and get real comfortable, unapologetic with using our personal privileges. Okay? I have home cooking privilege. Not everybody has somebody living with them who's an exceptional cook. I enjoy cooking. I'm a good cook, but I have somebody living here that's an exceptional cook. I can eat like a queen in here every damn day of my life, which saves me food. Because the person, they like to buy the food because that's what they're into. So I have grocery privilege. That means I can have extra money in my pocket since that person likes to feed people. Use your privileges as you're black. Stop acting like you don't got none. But the thing is this is what this black man told me. Said, when you're black and you find out your privileges, don't talk about it on the job. Some people on your job want to feel like they the only ones that got the privilege. Some people on your job is race and gender and sexuality bias, and they don't want to hear that you got privileges that they don't got. There's black people that like to talk about their privileges on the job, and then they start getting set up and fired on the job or wrote up, and people start snitching on them. Their hours start getting cut. If you have artistic privilege, never ever talk about it on a job. Because art can always lead you to some side money. Okay? Artistic talent and skill is a privilege.